Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge and JC Abbott, along with his noted Quidditch skills, JC.
Yes, I believe they call it quad ball now, gentlemen, due to some copyright issues. But there was a brief period in my misspent youth where I played a little Quidditch. But just to set the record straight, I was not an elite Quidditch player. I was a subpar Quidditch player by all standards, and I think that needs to be noted for the record.
So you weren't Harry Potter. Harry Potter was an elite Quidditch player.
I was not a snitch. I was whatever the Quidditch equivalent of a goon is.
The snitch is a piece of equipment in Quidditch. It's not a player.
Actually, it is a person in Quidditch.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because they get a guy to dress up in like a lycra gold suit, gets little booty shorts on with a ball dangling off his butt, and you have to go chase him around. The Seeker goes after him. That's what Harry Potter was.
That's correct. My goodness.
Dunk, would you ever be a snitch? Games? No.
Short shorts?
I don't want to put on booty shorts. No, thank you.
It's for the right price, you would. Come on.
For the right price. Or why are we out here pimping out Doug here?
Hey, everybody's got their price.
That's the same.
Everybody's got their price. There's an amount of money will get me in the booty shorts. Everybody would be praying to go blind with some type of affliction, but I'd put them on.
I mean, I played rugby before that too, so I wore booty shorts because that's essentially what rugby shorts are. When they're up high in the mid calf, if you don't get the right size there,
let's keep this PG.
You risk a loss of containment, gentlemen.
Well, everyone's got their price, and JC's was $0. He did it for free. Do play rugby.
I used to wear Speedos too, playing water polo.
Okay,
Jesus.
Well, let's start.
Don't put these images in people's minds. Let's get it going.
Let's start
here.
The show.
Yes, we're discussing which undefeated West Division team is best.
Nathan Rourke's oblique injury.
This year's class for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame.
Hold up. Don't put unconfirmed reports on the podcast that Nathan Rourke is a Speedo guy. That's just unfair. Leave that to JC.
I corrected myself.
I thought you would imagine Nathan Rourke in a Speedo often, given how much you like Canadian quarterbacks. Don't you have a poster on your bedroom wall?
I'll have to ask him for one. Alonzo, Addae, and Noah Curtis being out for the season due to injury.
And the passing of longtime defensive lineman Swift Birch III. But first,
all three Ontario-based teams are off to 0-2 starts in 2025 as the Tiger Cats have lost to Calgary and Saskatchewan. The Argonauts have dropped games to Montreal and Calgary, and the Red Blacks are 0-2 because they took L's against Saskatchewan and Montreal. How would you rank those teams in terms of where your panic level would be?
To me, the two teams that shouldn't yet be panicking much at all, in my opinion, are Toronto and Ottawa. And that is because both have been without a starting quarterback, at least one of these two games, right? Drew Brown did not play this past week against the Alouettes. Chad Kelly has yet to suit up this season for the Argonauts, coming off a broken leg that he suffered in last year's East Final. The other thing is these two teams have both played the Alouettes, who have been absolutely fantastic, lights out so far this season. The team that should be panicking the most, in my view, is the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They are a relatively healthy team. Yes, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are a good team, but they were at home for that loss this past week. And if Brett Lauther doesn't miss 3 field goals, that game is not particularly close. The other part of it is they went into Calgary. Yes, the Stampeders, credit to them, look better than they were last year. We're going to talk about them in the next segment of the show. But nobody picked the Calgary Stampeders to finish atop the West Division. Going into McMahon is a game you should have least a decent chance of winning. I don't think Ryan officially picked the Stampeders to win the West.
Didn't he pick them to win the Grey Cup?
Well, yeah, but he picked a crossover Grey Cup. I don't know if that meant they finished first or finished fourth. I don't know. No sane person, we'll put it that way, picked the Calgary Stampeders to finish first in the West Division. Shout out, Ryan. We do love you. So the Hamilton Tiger Cats, to me, should be panicking the most. I guess I would put Toronto in that second level, and that's partly because Ryan Dinwiddie made it pretty clear that Chad Kelly's not playing in Week 3. They've got Saskatchewan at home. That's going to be a tough matchup, and it also looks like Wynton McManus might be banged up as well. So to me, Hamilton should be panicking. Toronto, little bit of panic. Ottawa, 0-2 start, not optimal, but I don't think there's any panicking that should be happening in the nation's capital, at least right now.
I think you nailed the order here, Hodge. The Ottawa Redblacks, I'm not really that concerned about. They're the best 0-2 team in the CFL in my mind. If Drew Brown is healthy this week, would they have been more competitive? I think that is entirely possible. I also think they've just lost two really good opponents, and they've got enough weapons on that team that I think they can compensate eventually and they'll find their stride. When it comes to Toronto, the question for me is how much does Chad Kelly help that team? Because it's clear that I think they're the worst of the three right now, but that's missing the biggest piece. It's whether all those other elements around Kelly, the defense that was robbed in free agency, the offense, which is largely unchanged, but has a couple of new pieces, are those units good enough? And I don't know the answer to that question, but we won't know until we see Kelly on the field with them. And then finally, the Ticats just look like the Ticats of old, right? The offense kind of figured it out this week. You like what you see from Kenny Lawler on the outside, but that defense continues to be a bit of a liability. They did not do enough to address it this offseason. And right now, they are looking like the ugly stepchild of this group because there isn't the same hope for the future that these other teams have.
Come on, JC. Ain't nobody ugly. We're all beautiful in our own way, all right? Don't be talking
Aw.
about me.
I'm glad you think I'm beautiful, Doug.
You did in our
course.
opening segment imply that JC should never ever make anybody think of him in a Speedo because it was ugly. So you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth right now. Just pointing
I got a
out.
poster for your wall too. I'll send it to you.
Oh no.
I don't want it. No, thank you. I was just saying I don't want to see it. Sorry, I wasn't implying anything
enough.
about his looks at all. Let's keep this moving. I think the Hamilton Tiger Cats should be using their fist and banging it down on the panic button. But fellas, it's too late. This team spent money on offense. Kenny Lawler around $300,000 when it didn't need to invest money there. Bo Levi Mitchell, we all know it so well, threw for over 5,400 yards last season. But this defense is full of people who are not proven, and especially in the front seven, that's the case. Plus some guys that are raw rookies. Like, I just don't understand how people saw the Tiger Cats as a legitimate threat in the East entering 2025. Guys, there were people who picked the Hamilton Tiger Cats to go to the Grey Cup. Now, 2 games does not a season make, and Hamilton can bounce back, and I think that offense can score a bunch of points. But the offense is going to need to average well over 30 points, perhaps 40, to be competitive in football games. Guys, let's say if Brett Lauther hit all 3 of his field goals and made the extra point, the Riders would have won that game easily by 10 more points, right? And I think that's something that you can say is actually realistic. And then if we talk about something, and Hodge, I want to get your take on this because I thought it was so off base, so I'll provide the balance. If that interception doesn't happen, that Stavros Katsantonis causes and Jonathan Moxey picks off, I think the Riders win it in an absolute blowout. And I say that because the Ticats took it the other way and ended up scoring a touchdown on offense. Now, I looked into that play multiple times. Hodge, you had a piping hot take. So give us it, and then I'll provide some balance.
What was my hot take? I have no idea what you're talking about.
I know
that
exactly
play.
what it was.
Come on, bro.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I just remember what you said. I put in our chat that on that particular play, I thought Trevor Harris looked old. I thought that play that he was throwing that ball down the seam. I forget who the intended target was. Who was the receiver?
It wasn't down the seam.
Well,
It
okay,
was
fair enough.
Was it Keyshawn Johnson?
No, Sam Emelis on a double
Okay.
Sam
move.
Emlis. Okay. Regardless, it was a long throw down the field that I think Chad Kelly, I think Nathan Rourke hammer in there. And I thought that Trevor Harris didn't put enough on it. And I actually don't think Trevor Harris is washed. I think he's a good quarterback. And given his reaction to that throw, he seemed really upset with himself. I'm speculating. It's possible that he was upset at himself for the decision, but I don't think the read was wrong. I think the read was awesome. The issue was he couldn't get the ball there in time before Stavros Katsantonis came from way over on the other hash mark down into making that play, breaking it up, perfectly timed hit, and then having Jonathan Moxey scoop up that interception on the tip drill. So I thought that had Trevor Harris stepped into that throw, which again, I think he can do, he makes it. But on that particular play, I thought that was a throwing error, not a decision error. It was a physical error on his part. And on that particular throw, I thought that he showed a lack of arm strength.
I don't think so at all. So let's go a few steps into it, right? Sam Emilus ran a double move, which appeared to me to be in the realm of an out and up. He had what I was told the option of best release. So he released inside Moxey, and I wondered if perhaps that was on Emilus to release outside Moxey to give his quarterback more open field to throw it out over that outside shoulder. And I think that's perhaps where the error was, is that Trevor Harris just had that ball too far inside for whatever reason for the interception to happen. I feel like if it was a little further down the field and on the outside shoulder, a throw that he can definitely make, then that completion could have been there. But also the protection, I don't think helped from the standpoint that it was slide protection that way. So if you're a free safety in terms of Stavros Katsantonis reading the play, usually with slide protection, you're going to take a step or two that way if you're smart, knowing that if it's coming backside, you have that extra beat to get over there. So I thought it was a great play from Katsantonis to get in there, especially knowing how he was reading the offensive line and the flow of everything that was going. But if Mark Mueller calls that play as a straight drop back, there's more time and space there. And if Trevor Harris throws a better ball, which I think he would admit to, then that's potentially a touchdown because Sam Emilus won on the route. And if he has best release, going inside certainly got him wide open. Now, that's a difficult throw to hammer in there, Hodge. We're talking about essentially a field go route that you want these guys to hammer in there. Like, that is a difficult throw to put on a rope. I'm not saying that nobody in this league can do it because there are a bunch of quarterbacks that can. I think actually Trevor Harris can do it. But when you sort of pull back the curtain a bit on the play and understand what Katsantonis was reading, what Trevor Harris saw, Sam Emilus and his release, that those convergence of items, let's say, or those convergence of things led to the interception. Definitely Trevor Harris should have thrown the ball more up the field to his outside shoulder. But anyways, I digress. The Tiger
Seems like you guys are saying the exact same thing. Like,
well, Hodge doesn't think he has
Hodge
the arm
is saying
strength
he
to put the ball
short-armed it
pounded
That's
in.
not what I
inside.
said at all. I said on that particular play, I thought he needed to put it on a rope. And yeah, it's a hard thing to do, but there's a reason Trevor Harris gets paid over $500,000 to throw the football. And that's because he needs to be good at it, right? And I think Nathan Rourke can make that throw. I think Chad Kelly can make that throw. Zach Collaros, maybe. I think he certainly could
make that
5
throw.
years ago. I think he could probably make that throw. But yeah, you got to put it on a rope. It's sailed up there. I don't know the wind conditions. I wasn't in the building. I know Hamilton often has swirling winds. That might have played a factor. I don't know. I will also say on the commentary, people were wondering why Stavros Katsantonis was a fourth-round pick. The reason is because he tested positive for PEDs coming out of the draft in 2021 and got bumped to 2022. And when you test positive for PEDs, your draft stock drops. That being said, yes, he is an elite safety, and he should have still been, at worst, a second-round pick in that draft, and he ended up falling to Hamilton. What a fantastic selection for them. He's been great. Getting back to the Ticats, I thought Bo Levi Mitchell was better in this game. I still don't think he was elite. He had, I think, the ugliest hit screen I've ever seen in my life. I don't know if it got stuck to his hand or what it was, but it hit the dirt halfway to his receiver, and Bo just kind of knelt over like, what am I doing? I thought the reaction spoke volumes. I love that he was more selective with Kenny Lawler. Kenny Lawler, week 1, 6 of 13 catches to targets. This week, 8 to 10 with 162 yards. That's sensational. The other issue, though, is Tim White, who was the number 1 receiver in this offense, only 3 catches on 7 targets, 22 yards. That's not going to get it done. And the other thing that I'm wondering about, week 1, Bo Levi Mitchell, 50 pass attempts. This week, 40. That's still too many, especially when Greg Bell was gashing what is a very good Saskatchewan Roughriders run defense. He got 46 yards off 5 attempts. If you are picking up 9 yards a carry on the ground, why are you not running the ball? This game was 7-6 Hamilton at halftime. It's not like they were down 21. And it's like, oh my gosh, we got to start putting the ball in the air. That, from a play calling perspective, I thought was on Scott Milanovich. You cannot be running the ball once for every 8 pass attempts. That is going to get Bo Levi Mitchell hurt, and that is not beneficial for anybody. They added Liam Dobson in free agency on the O-line. I could tell you, Liam Dobson, bruiser in the run game. Pass pro is the weaker side of his game. Why are you paying all this money to a guard if you're not going to run the ball behind him? I want to see more run from Hamilton. The downside for the Tabbies, by the way, they're on bye in week 3. You want to know who they play in week 4? The Montreal Alouettes. Not a favorable schedule in the short term for the Tiger Cats. They got to get this cooking on the bye, or they're staring down 0-3.
I will just push back on your commentary on the run game a little bit. I don't completely disagree, but I do think it's worth noting Greg Bell also had, I think, 6 catches for 46 yards or something in the passing game. Milanovich said afterwards that was part of the game plan as an extension of the run game. Get him quick passes from Bo Levi Mitchell where Bo is not under threat and they can get him out in space because the run game wasn't working in week 1. I think they checked that box, and that's part of the reason when they did hand the ball to him, he was able to get more yardage. They were spreading out that defense. So I think that's more of a strategic thing, and ultimately it worked in their favor. Whether or not they should have kept with it a little bit more and not thrown the ball deep as much as they did late, I think you can make that argument. But there was a method to the madness with the usage of Greg Bell, and I think his production proves that it was effective.
I think that's a point well taken. My counterpoint would be, well, why can't Greg Bell catch 5 passes and also run the ball 12 times? I think he's capable of doing that, right? Use him more. If it's working, use him more. Get that offensive line firing off the ball. Take some pressure off of Bo Levi Mitchell. There are 3 undefeated teams in the West Division, as the Stampeders have beaten Hamilton and Toronto, the Rough Riders have beaten Ottawa and Hamilton, and the Blue Bombers have beat BC in their lone game. Based on how they've looked thus far, how would you rank those 3 teams?
I think you still have to put the Saskatchewan Roughriders at the top. I've been super impressed with them. Every week we go in, they've got a new crew of guys on the injured list, and you think this is the moment when they're going to take a step back. They haven't yet, and they've figured out different guys to step up both offensively and defensively. I think we need to talk about that offensive line, especially with all the injuries they've had up front. Daniel Johnson, who is still technically a rookie, even though he was on the practice roster last year because he never played a game, starting at left tackle there. Trevor Harris has only been sacked once. I think that is a testament to that group. It's a testament to their coaching. I've been very, very impressed by them. After that, to me, it has to be the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, just because of how they looked in the difficult situation that they had against BC. No Zach Collaros. Chris Streveler looked like an actual passer in this game. Brady Oliveira goes down. Matthew Peterson steps up and looks like a monster. That was a difficult circumstance for that team to be in their first game, and they answered the bell like none other. And no disrespect, the Calgary Stampeders are last just simply because they've looked impressive against weaker teams. We've talked about the struggles that Hamilton have had. They beat them handily in the opener, but how much stock do you place in that? And then the Toronto Argonauts don't have Chad Kelly. To me, that's a game that they should have won as well, and they did. Full credit for doing that, but I will wait to give a full assessment of the Stampeders until I see them against an opponent that I truly trust can test them.
It's simple for me at the moment. Saskatchewan 1, Winnipeg 2, and Calgary 3. Yes, the Stampeders are 2-0, but they beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who are 0-2, and the Toronto Argonauts, who are 0-2, and also without Chad Kelly in the lineup. I think it's a great start for Calgary, considering in the offseason, a lot of people wanted Dave Dickinson to be fired following the 2024 campaign. I felt like rightfully so, but he's come back and reloaded with Vernon Adams Jr. at quarterback and brought back some other pieces and added some new ones as well. You know, I'm talking about Flo Oramolade and Dominique Rhymes and Tevin Jones in that offense, but Jalen Philpott looks unbelievable. And it was Philpott that said 95% of the reason as to why he re-signed with the Stampeders was because of Vernon Adams Jr. I feel like just his presence there, his mobility, escapability, whatever you want to call it, is helping them in the run game too. But the defense has been better. You have to give credit there to Bob Slowick and that unit, which some people questioned in the offseason, at least for this 2-0 start. So I think when Zach Collaros comes back under center, Winnipeg will improve. There's question marks at running back in terms of how long Brady Oliveira is going to be out. Matthew Peterson filled in very well for him, but it's a different thing when you're the starting running back going into a game and team can prep for you and what you like to do, even though it's just a little bit of film. And I think right now, JC hit it on the head. The Riders are dealing with injuries as they come. It's the cliche next man up mentality. But I think they have the makings to be a really good football team. And similar to what I said earlier about the Ticats needing to close their fist and pound the panic button because that game could have been a blowout, like Saskatchewan could have easily scored 38 points, if not more, in that football game. And that's just talking about Brett Lauther making his kicks.
Then we're talking about +9, not +10, because he did get a single.
But I thought he missed an extra point.
Yeah, but 3 field goals plus an extra point is 10, minus 1 single is 9.
Touche. Not a mathematician. That's why we got the other boys here to keep us straight. So that's why I think Saskatchewan has that upside, is because they've won these football games, but there's still room to grow there. Like at one point in that game against Ottawa, the Riders were dominating, but as Corey Mace will point out, they allowed the Red Blacks to get back in the football game. And we haven't even heard anything from Shane Ray yet, right? Who started 2 games there, but he hasn't been making much noise, or at least gotten on the sack stat sheet. And that's not the only way that we should measure him, but there's some pieces there that I think can still step up and make this team even better.
I think Calgary is certainly the 3rd spot here, and that's no disrespect to them. VA hasn't thrown a touchdown pass yet in 2 games. Obviously, he will start doing that. I think the injury, Reggie Bagleton, right, is notable. That did not look good in Toronto. We wish him all the best, and whatever he's dealing with, it certainly looks like a knee injury based on where the ice was allocated after the game. I'm not going to speculate, but it did look serious, so we wish him all the best. To me, this is a 2-horse race right now, pun intended, with the Calgary Stampeders. No, okay, that's fine.
I like it.
You guys suck. Winnipeg is number 1 for me, and it's partly for the reasons that I don't know. I think you guys are like, oh, Saskatchewan's great because look at how many injuries they're dealing with. Yeah, credit to them, they're handling injuries well. But the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are a healthy football team, right? They went into week 1. Yeah, Zach Collaros out due to suspension. He'll obviously be back. Yeah, Brady Oliveira went out early in that game. Evidently didn't matter. They still mopped the floor with BC, and it wasn't a perfect outing. They had a couple of explosions on the defensive side of the ball. One where Jamal Peters kind of tripped on Jamal Parker tripped on the receiver a little bit. Another was just a broken coverage with Keon Hatcher coming across the field in kind of a deep crossing route. Sergio Castillo missed a convert and a field goal, not optimal, right? Offensively, they had the pick that Chris Streveler threw. But like at the end of the day, they were favorites in that game for a reason. I picked BC to win that game for a reason. I picked BC to cover that spread for a reason. And the game was not close. Like I thought Winnipeg's defense looked better than it did last year. The offensive line with Micah Vanterpool in, Eric Lofton out at right tackle, that did not matter. Kendall Randolph held that position down, I thought, very well. I think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are the team to beat in the West Division. I do. Saskatchewan is not far behind. For full transparency, my ballot for power rankings this week was Montreal 1, Winnipeg 2, Saskatchewan 3. Saskatchewan is not a distant 3 for me. They're a close 3. But I think Winnipeg is the better team right now. If they look terrible in Vancouver in week 3 and Zach Collaros looks rusty and can't put it together, I'm happy to eat my words. But right now, I've got Winnipeg slightly ahead of Saskatchewan and then a pretty big drop-off to Calgary. But I do want to, again, sing some praises for the Stampeders. I had them 9 coming into the season on my power rankings ballot. This week, full transparency, I had them 4. That's a pretty legit spot for a team that high. I think I had them as high as anybody else on the ballot. So I defensively have been very impressed with them. And VA, again, the touchdown passes will start coming. Rene Paredes I thought everything on this team was going to struggle except for Rene Paredes. It's like been completely backwards. Rene Paredes struggled this past week, but the offense is moving the ball. The defense looks great. So that's my order.
My hesitation about having the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at number 1 has less to do with them and more to do with the fact that I just don't know what to do with the BC Lions right now. Right? They looked so good in week 1 against that Edmonton Elks team that, yes, had not played together, but acquired so much talent in the offseason that I was a believer once again after being skeptical off season. And then they come out against Winnipeg and they look like the flawed team that they appeared to be on paper. And which version the BC Lions prove themselves to be will determine how impressive that Winnipeg Blue Bombers victory is, because they defeated them in basically every single facet. They made Nathan Rourke look silly. They've had his number for the entirety of his career. The numbers are shocking in terms of what he's able to put up against Winnipeg versus the rest of the league. That continued, even if he put up some better numbers late. He really struggled early, and the defense got embarrassed, right? Gary Peters looked terrible on the outside for maybe the first time in his career. Carrick Wheatfall just ate his lunch, and they got busted up the middle by a rookie running back who was sitting in his U of A dorm room just a few months ago. And full credit to Matthew Peterson. He was a great U Sports player, but that just can't happen at the professional level in a guy's first game. I thought it was terrible linebacker play. I thought they were soft at the point of attack. And some of the highlights that you see of those Peterson runs are just simply embarrassing for this Lions team. So if that's who they truly are, then that's not as impressive a victory by Winnipeg. Right now, we know what the Saskatchewan Roughriders have done. We know the adversity they've overcome. And to me, I put a lot of stock in that at this stage of the season. It makes it tougher for them to sustain it long term, but they've proven their character and their toughness to this stage. Canadian quarterback Nathan Rourke suffered an oblique injury in BC's loss to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and pulled himself from the game late as Jeremiah Mazzoli took over the controls. Should Rourke play the second half of the home and home, or should the Lions rest him until he's back to 100%?
That depends. Can he make the injury worse or not? If not, Nathan Rourke's going to do everything in his power to be out on the field, but BC needs to balance that with the long term this season. If the injury can be made worse and you're going to rush and put him back out there, don't do it. The season is a marathon, not a sprint. I know Nathan Rourke is going to want to play. Players always want to play. But this is why coaches and football operations staffs are there to sometimes protect players from themselves. In this instance, there's a longer week here. You know, BC was on an ultra short week last week going into Winnipeg against a Blue Bombers team that was off of bye. You know, I just don't feel like that's fair. It makes me think about the schedule. I wonder if there's a way where we can avoid that in the future, where you have a team playing an ultra short week going up against a team that's off a bye. Like, that is just too much of a competitive disadvantage. I know there's an odd number of teams, but I think there's gotta be a better way to go about that within the schedule. I know venue availability can play into that too, but I just didn't think that was fair. I'm not saying that's why Nathan Rourke got hurt, but it certainly would help if there was a bit of a longer runway. So hopefully the CFL can get that figured out.
I agree on the scheduling issue. I think that in week 2, it's probably less of a problem than if it's week 12 or 15. But I agree, it's not terribly equitable for one team to be coming off a short week and then going to play a very rested team. I fully agree, especially when you're on the road, right? Then you've got the travel involved as well. So I agree with that. And by the way, this is the last meeting between Winnipeg and BC this year. That to me is a super weird scheduling quirk. Like, this should be the kind of matchup where it's like, oh, they have a home and home at the start of the year, and then, week 19 is the rubber match. That scheduling makes sense. And until I looked at the full schedule, double checked it, thought that was the case. I thought there was a late season third game. That is not the case. This is the only 2 meetings between the teams. And I think that's silly, to be perfectly
Hodge,
honest.
Look at the Bombers' schedule overall. There's a bunch of these home and homes in there. And I think it's warranted
it's a bit
at least
of a weird
question
schedule
to the league, because, I know Saskatchewan's schedule like the back of my hand because of my travel and covering the games. They don't have anything like that, I think, except for the home and home Labor Day Classic and Banjo Bowl with the Blue Bombers.
Yeah, Winnipeg has two more, weeks 5 and 7. They have a bye in there, but they have for them is a home and home with Calgary. Then weeks 8 and 9, they have a home and home with Toronto, and then week 10 they have Calgary again. So there is a 6-week span where they play against two different CFL teams. I think fans in Winnipeg are going to be very bored of watching the Argonauts and Stampeders once week 10 finally wraps. But at least early in the season, like a home and home with an East Division team makes sense. If you're a West Division team, right? I don't think it makes sense to have an inter-division or rather intra-division game like this where it's back-to-back and then you don't play again. But whatever, this would hardly be the first time the CFL had a weird schedule. And for the record, Mike O'Shea, when he's been asked about the schedule, says he literally does not care. Whatever the schedule is, they think it's perfect, and they're just going to shut up and play the games. So evidently he's not upset about it. I remember last year, by the way, there was a game where Winnipeg was coming off a short week, and they had a team coming in off a bye, and the Bombers, I forget which team it was, mopped the floor with them, and O'Shea was asked about it post-game, and he was like, yeah, we like playing football. We're happy to play football whenever, which I thought was kind of refreshing, but I do actually disagree with him to some extent. I think player safety does show that on short weeks, there's at least a little bit of an updated risk in terms of injury. I don't know if all the facts, I know we had a long conversation about that last year. The NFL has done some research on it. It doesn't appear, JC, if I remember correctly, you led that kind of push. And from the NFL standpoint, there's not an increased risk of injury on Thursday nights when they have short weeks. Anyway, I'll get back to the question at hand, which is whether or not Nathan Rourke should play. And to me, the answer is hell no. Drew Brown was the right decision for Ottawa to sit him out in week 2. Could he have played? Yeah, probably. But as Justin laid out, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're probably not beating the Alouettes anyway. You may as well sit your guy and make sure that he's 100% for week 3. I think the Toronto Argonauts have been smart at keeping Chad Kelly out. As Ryan Dinwiddie said, we need to wait until he can protect himself, and what he means by that is move around effectively to prevent taking those big hits. I think if there's any injury to Nathan Rourke in week 3, you sit him out, you play Jeremiah Masoli, a guy who has seen every possible defense in the CFL, who's been around forever. Play him, let Nathan Rourke get back to 100%. It is a fool's errand in this league to play your franchise quarterback in even, I would say, the first half of the season if he's not 100%. This is the time of year where you let him get back to 100%. If in the second half of the season you're in a playoff push, you need to push the issue a little bit, fine. First half of the season, you sit your guy if he's not ready to play.
There are 3 elements to this. First of all, the scheduling thing. Nathan Rourke did not get hurt because of the schedule. He got hurt because his offensive line hung him out to dry in this game. And the next time you're in a conversation with somebody on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, and they're bemoaning the fact that the CFL has such low quality Canadian offensive linemen who are putting quarterbacks in jeopardy, simply point them in the direction of the BC Lions, who are currently starting 4 Americans and apparently can't block anybody to save their quarterback's life. That has to be cleaned up. In terms of Rourke playing or not, he absolutely should not be on the field. This is a critical moment for Buck Pierce as a first-time head coach to put his foot down and protect his starting quarterback. Nathan Rourke is going to try everything in his arsenal. He will plead on his knees, begging to play in this game because that's the guy he is. It doesn't matter if his arm was hanging out of his socket or his leg was broken. He would try and go out there. You need to protect the asset and protect the player because these oblique injuries can be tricky, right? A typical strain of the oblique is a 2 to 4 week injury. If you strain it worse, it can be 6 to 8. If you tear the thing, that could be the entire season. And that's not the situation you want to be in. You'll trade a loss in week 3 for the chance to push for the playoffs later. That's not when you want your backup quarterback in the game. So the Lions have to be smart here and sit Rourke in the short term in order to protect him in the long term. And the last element is I'll go a step further and say that Jeremiah Masoli shouldn't play in this game either. I don't see any point in sticking out the veteran backup for this game when you've had him listed as third on the depth chart all season and stuck him in the game over Chase Bryce, who apparently won that job in the preseason? You've invested 3 years into Bryce at this point. You still don't know what you have. There is no better moment than now to throw him in the fire and see what that asset looks like in real game action. You're not going to get any benefit from playing Jeremiah Mazzoli. Yes, he's a veteran. You know what you're going to get. Maybe it's a little bit more stable. But again, if you're in a situation late in the season where Rourke goes down a second time and you need to put in a guy who's going to give you the best chance to win games, I would like to have a baseline for what Chase Bryce looks like, considering all the time that they've put into him to this stage. This is the moment to do that. I think they would be foolish to play either Rourke or Mazzoli in this game.
Hashtag free Chase Bryce.
Is there any other quarterbacks, by the way, in the CFL who should be freed in week 3? Maybe one in Toronto, maybe. Maybe.
Well,
Get on the horn to Tucker Horn.
Depends if you
I can't believe they didn't put him in late.
by started or freed by released, because I could think of some guys that fall in the latter category too.
That was a really ugly performance.
It was terrible.
Second half was better. Let's give him a bit of.
Fourth
Right.
quarter
It
was
upgraded
better.
it from, yeah. Anyway, we'll
Let's
see what
move on.
Toronto does.
This year's class for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame has been unveiled as receiver Jermaine Copeland, offensive lineman Brian Chew, and Jovan Olafioye, linebacker Daryl Hall, defensive back Scott Flagel, official Glenn Johnson, and longtime Regina Rams head coach Frank McChrystal will be inducted. Hodge, is this a worthy class?
It is. Jermaine Copeland, one of the best receivers of his generation. Jovan Olafioye, a true shutdown left tackle. Daryl Hall, a guy who helped revolutionize the strong side linebacker position, right? Taking that position from more of a traditional linebacker spot to one played by a defensive back. Glenn Johnson officiated 1 million football games in this league, including, I think it was 12 Grey Cups. I didn't double check the press release. That's my fault. I should have. Scott Flagel, ultra physical on the back end. I think he had 60 takeaways over the course of his career, something like 40 interceptions, 20 fumble recoveries. Unbelievable. Frank McChrystal, an institution in Saskatchewan. But the person I want to highlight most is Brian Chew, a guy who I have said on this podcast multiple times. It is laughable that he's not already in the Hall of Fame. You could make an argument that Brian Chew is the best center to ever play in the CFL. And I know tackles and then guards usually get picked up before the center position, but I'm sorry, the center position is not easier to play than tackle or guard. It's just different. There are checks that you have to do as a center. Yes, there's fewer one-on-one matchups, but also you have a job to do every play, which is snapping the football. And if you can't snap the football well, your team is not going to win games. So I love that Brian Chew got this call. In my opinion, it should have come much earlier. I think this was his 8th year of eligibility. I think his last year playing was 2013. So he's been waiting a long time, right? You're eligible 4 years after the fact. So I wish he hadn't had to wait this long, but I'm glad that Brian Chew, I believe it was 7-time All-CFL selection, multiple-time Grey Cup winner, was in 2002 named the league's most outstanding offensive lineman, finally got this call. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't also mention Winnipeg media members Paul Friesen and Judy Owen, who are being inducted into the media wing of the Hall of Fame. Freeze is one of the best in the business when it comes to pushing someone in an interview, asking the tough questions that a lot of other people don't want to ask. And then Judy Owen, the second woman to ever be inducted into the media wing. She has been a trailblazer doing what she's been doing for over 30 years. And it was awesome to get to actually see them both on Thursday when this announcement came out in Winnipeg and congratulate them in person. So congrats to all the inductees. To me, this is a great class.
It really is a great class, Hodge. And for the record, Brian Chew, he hasn't been waiting since 2013. His last game was in 2009. It is egregious that he has been waiting for this long. And I was thrilled to see the video that was put out of him learning of the announcement from his high school players. For those who don't know, he's been the head coach at Vancouver College, the most dominant high school program out here in BC for the last number of years, has won back-to-back varsity championships and JV championships and grade 8 championships as well, running that program. They are a true powerhouse, and he got that honor from the players that he is currently giving back to. And they may have let slip a little bit on social media a couple months early that he was going into the Hall of Fame, which I thought was pretty funny. But there is no better person or people to give that recognition to a coach and someone giving back than your own players. I'm sure that was a very special moment for Chew. I love the fact that we have 2 offensive linemen here. These guys get so overlooked in the Hall of Fame process. There's a laundry list of guys who should be in that aren't at that position right now. Javon Olafioye was as good as it gets as a tackle, and frankly, was an NFL caliber player who, because of his high blood pressure, just got cast aside by that league and turned down time and time again. It was the CFL's benefit, and he didn't have that long of a career, but his peak was as dominant as any player in the league, a truly, truly deserving representative from out here in BC.
Jermaine Copeland is far and away my favorite player in this bunch because I remember watching him as a kid flying around with Montreal and Calgary. Don't remember too much of the end of his career with Toronto, to be honest, but he was okay despite that, a couple of 600-yard plus seasons. But you talk about this guy, I mean, he's an XFL champion way back when the XFL was actually popular, not turned into a different league. Yeah, he was there with He Hate Me. Copeland running around in that league making plays, 2-time Grey Cup champion, 3-time CFL All-Star, and his best season came in 2003, guys. He lit it up. Check this out. 99 catches for 1,757 yards and 14 touchdowns. Like, this guy was an absolute baller. By my count, he's got 5 times where he went over 1,000 yards. He was just such a fun player to watch flying around the field. You could line him up all over, but I remember him best for being one of those Americans that learned quickly how to use the waggle. Jermaine Copeland, an absolute star, dare I say superstar, during his time in the CFL.
It's now time for Hodge's heritage moment. This is a good one, folks. On this day in 2018, a young man entered the field of play at BC Place Stadium wearing nothing but a Jonathan Jennings jersey and a Speedo. A pair of blue underwear. With security unsuccessful in corralling the man, BC Lions defensive back Marcel Young took matters into his own hands by leveling the streaker, ending his delay of game. Video of the incident went viral, garnering millions of views on television and social media. The fan later hired a law firm that released a statement claiming he'd suffered, quote, serious injuries, including a mild traumatic brain injury, close quote. Nothing appears to have ever come of this legal action, however, likely due to the fact that he was considered a trespasser after entering the field of play, a violation for which he was fined $115. JC, were you present when this happened?
I was. I can remember the blue underwear going up and over as he got laid out. It was quite the hit that Young laid on him. I don't know what was more embarrassing, getting absolutely blown up like that in front of all those people, the fact that he was, only wearing underwear, or the fact that people were buying Jonathan Jennings jerseys back in the day because he just didn't pan out.
He was a hot commodity, bro.
He was.
I'm sending
he had
strays.
5,000-yard season, if I remember right.
He had one.
2016 Jonathan Jennings was different. He was built different. He was.
2018 Jonathan Jennings was not. Well, he was built different in another way.
I've spoken with Jonathan Jennings about this. His shoulder got cranked, and it was never the same. Like that's just what it was. Like it was an injury thing.
This young man, I'm sure he's never been the same.
This young man also got cranked. It wasn't so much the shoulder, but he got just in generally cranked.
Note to this guy: don't jump out and run around on a football field where dudes are literally trained to take people out physically, okay? You're putting your own self in danger. Like, would you go run around at a army shooting range, for example? You're asking for it if you're going down on the field, okay?
Yeah, if you jump in with the alligators at the zoo, don't complain when you get bitten by an alligator.
Don't try to sue the alligator, exactly. I do remember another streaker. Was it at BC Place?
I mean, this one was BC.
Are you talking about the Grey Cup one? Because I remember a lot about that particular streaker.
I forgot about that.
The most recent streaker at BC plays.
And that was a true streaker. There was no Jonathan Jennings jersey involved in that particular incident. It was au natural.
Well said. Let's go to the 3-minute drill. Reggie Begelton went down early in Calgary's win over the Argonauts with what appears to be a serious knee injury. How badly will the Stamps miss him?
They're going to miss him badly. I'm bullish on Jalen Philpott. I'm bullish on Tevin Jones, Dominic Grimes. Like, they've got some other weapons there, but Reggie Begelton, for my money, was the best of the bunch. We wish him a speedy recovery. Jalen Philpott recorded his first 100-yard receiving game for the Stampeders. Has he done enough to unseat twin brother Tyson for Philpott supremacy?
He hasn't yet. He's got to back it up in multiple games, but boy, that was an impressive performance. A couple of ridiculous adjustments on the ball and absolutely trucked a defender on one play. That's the type of Jalen Philpott that I hope we see week in and week out. Defensive lineman Noah Curtis took to social media to announce he's undergone surgery for a torn ACL. Is that a big loss for the Elks?
It could be, man. He was on the come up last year. They did invest a lot in the defensive line, so it might not hurt as much as people think, but still, that dude showed he's got the potential to be a baller. Hopefully, he can get back on the field and be healthy. Former All-Star pass rusher Swift Birch III died at the age of 55. How will you remember him?
Honestly, I didn't recognize this name, but once I looked him up, heck of a player, 60 sacks over close to 10 years in the CFL. And what a memorable name, Swift Birch. To me, that is right up there with the best of the best in CFL history. Our condolences to Swift Birch. There's a GoFundMe for his family. He passed away of stage 4 cancer. If you want to find that, you can Google it. We also have the link to it on our website. The Red Blacks have lost Canadian safety Alonzo Addae for the rest of the season. How big of a loss is that?
That's a very, very significant loss. They're currently starting Charlie Rigland, who was cut by BC in the offseason after being a backup there. Liked him coming out of the draft, but that's a big step up. Hopefully Justin Howell can return from injury at some point and take that role. But until then, they are dealing with a very inexperienced player on the back end. Brett Lauther went 2 for 5 on his field goals for the Riders this week. Should Saskatchewan be panicking?
I don't think so. He kind of has one of these type games once a season, seems to be what happens for Brett Lauther. And last year it happened in the Labor Day Classic. Then he went on to make 22 straight field goals to end the season. And he's come up clutch for this team. So those points weren't necessarily needed, but you still want to see him banging them through. Chris Drevler told you, Hodge, that he doesn't pay attention to any of his doubters. Somehow, I just don't believe it. But do you actually believe him?
I'm kind of torn. On the one hand, he seemed legit when he said it. On the other hand, maybe he's used his doubters to become better at throwing the football. We talked about it in the preseason. He looked better in the preseason than he has in the past. And that, to me, came true in the regular season. 3 touchdown passes, especially 2 of those throws to Nick Dembski, dropped it in the bucket. So Chris Drevler, I do genuinely think, has improved as a passer. Good for him. Javon Olefioye told you, JC, that longtime offensive line coach Dan Durazio should be inducted into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. Is he right?
He absolutely is right. And this is my biggest beef with the Canadian Football Hall of Fame is we've got quarterbacks in there that have thrown more interceptions than touchdowns. We've got head coaches in there with middling records. We've got below average commissioners in there being honored as builders. But there's no assistant coaches in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. Guys like Durazio, who basically redefined technique along the offensive line in the CFL, or the late Rich Stubler, who redefined how we play defense, should absolutely be in on the same footing as their players and their bosses. Their contribution was just as impactful. The Montreal Alouettes have now won 9 straight games against the Ottawa Red Blacks and have an 11-game winning streak at TD Place in Ottawa, winning every single game there since 2018. Are the Red Blacks ever going to break that streak, Don?
Yes, I'll confidently say at some point before the end of time, whenever that is, Ottawa will win a football game at home against Montreal. Hodge, the Blue Bombers cut veteran CFL receiver Reggie White Jr. Why?
Well, I think there's 2 reasons. One, if you look at how Carrick Wheatfall played, they're not necessarily in need of receivers in that group right now. The other thing is they needed a spot for Ian LaRue, Canadian long snapper out of Laval, after Mike Benson got hurt in game 1, was unable to finish. So LaRue on the PR right now, wouldn't surprise me if he dressed week 3 as the team's long snapper. For Justin Dunk, for JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. We'll see you next week for a hopefully Speedo-less episode of the 3DownNation podcast.
Not Speedo-less.
Remember,
we want to keep something on, Hodge.
How about we just keep normal clothes on? That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
For some people, a Speedo is a normal bathing suit.
And we're not wearing bathing suits on the pod. It is. But we're not wearing bathing suits on the pod. We're wearing normal everyday clothing on the pod. Don't forget Wednesday, JC and I will have our picks straight up and against the spread for week 3 in the Canadian Football League. We had a good week in week 2 after a shaky week 1. Like, subscribe, give us 5 stars. If you didn't like the show, give us 5 stars anyway. We'll see you next week.